Ding, 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 ding. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where we talk about the streaming horror movies and horror movies that are in theaters, horror shows. We just love horror. And you know what? We've been talking about RoboCop, which is kind of horror adjacent for like the past 4 weeks. We've been talking about this great documentary called RoboDoc, and it's been a lot of fun. But now it's time for us to get back to our horror roots. So now we're talking about the sci-fi horror film, the home invasion alien movie, No One Will Save You. Danny, I don't know how you feel about this movie. I'm very interested to see what our conversation is going to be like today.
I grew up with the X-Files being a staple in my household.
Yes.
And so this movie immediately made me think of a feature-length X-Files episode. And you know, like, we grew up in a time of Alien Autopsy, where that was like the big faux reality show that debuted, and Fire in the Sky was a big event movie for a lot of people, especially when it came to VHS. I really enjoyed this movie. I think part of what I liked so much about it was how much of an homage it felt, how old school it felt. You know, for a movie to come out in 2023, to not even go into theaters, to be released straight to streaming, which is the most 2023 thing you can do.
Yeah.
And for it to feel like I'm watching something that was made when I was a teenager, without it being like silly like that, like something where like the characters are acting like it's the 90s. I think that takes a lot of skill. And I mean, we'll talk a lot more as we get into this, but Brian Duffield is somebody who I followed for a while now. I feel like I started posting like In Duffield We Trust with every movie that he like wrote or directed over the last few years. And then I started to see a lot more famous people than me put In Duffield We Trust in their positive reviews. I think like Stephen King was the first person to like blow this movie up on social media. I think he went on Twitter or X or whatever we call it now, and he just raved about it. Guillermo del Toro did like a full breakdown of all the things that he loved about it, and he even like talked about things that I would never have picked up on, like the allusions to Christianity and things of that nature. And so even if I know that this movie might be some people out there don't love, or maybe they don't buy into the hype of it.
Yeah.
But when like Stephen King and Guillermo del Toro are like running to social media to throw praise on it, it tells you that this is a filmmaker who is respected among their peers, and that it's a work that at least connects with like the pros of the genre. Let's say that.
Yeah. It's cool. I did see the Stephen King post. And right over here, we got another person that I'd say is just as famous and whose opinion I expect as much. And that's Michael Bongiorno from Pop Culture Man-Children. He commented right here saying, I loved this movie. I kind of figured that you would be a fan of this movie too. Here's the thing. I like this movie, right? But okay. I've seen people say that it's like going to be divided, that some people are going to love this movie, some people are going to hate it. And I've mostly seen people say they love it. I have seen a couple of people be like, wait, this was it? Like, this is the movie that everyone's raving about? And then I did see this one guy, Daniel Barnett, who we've had on our channel before, the author of the Nightmareland Chronicles. He was saying that it felt more like a movie to kind of showcase the director's talent versus something that had something to say. Like there wasn't that much to it. And I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. One of my favorite movies, I think it might have even been on my top 10 when we first started this channel, was Underwater which was, I'm sure we're going to talk about, but Brian Duffield wrote that, and I felt like that was such an unrecognized kind of gem that year. I thought it was just this great thriller with Kristen Stewart, and I really loved the ending of it. But I just thought it was really well done, very tight movie, and that's how I feel about this movie too. It's like really well done. It's really tight. And there, I said tight. I feel like fucking the guy from Pitch Meeting.
Yeah,
it's tight. On alien invasion movies are tight. But like I feel like you know what it is for me, Danny? It's a black phone situation. I think it's good. I like it, but I feel like there's something more. Now, you mentioned Fire in the Sky, and you mentioned the X-Files, and when I saw the trailer for this and I knew what it was about, I was like, oh man, this is actually going to be kind of scary. I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch this, because Fire in the Sky, that's like one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, just based on that alien abduction scene. And I was like, oh, this might be really scary. Yeah. And I just found this to be like this thriller, which wasn't really scary, but it was like very well done. Oh, here's Mike's joining in some more here. You were The Babysitter 2, and that was very good. Yes, I agree.
go
ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, he wrote the Babysitter movies. He wrote Underwater. One of my favorite movies of 2020 was Love and Monsters, which he wrote. And then he wrote and directed a movie called Spontaneous, which was one of my favorite movies of the year it came out. It was either 2019, 2020, 2021. It was just a few years ago. He writes young characters really, really well. For like, it's a weird skill for like an adult man to be able to write young characters well, especially young women, which I find he writes very well. Also, Spontaneous, and this movie especially. But for me, this movie, I don't think it's a perfect movie by any stretch. I probably wouldn't put this as my favorite Duffield film, whether, counting the ones that he's written or directed. I think that would still probably be either Spontaneous or Love and Monsters. But I just completely bought into this as a throwback. The three things that I had circled on my paper when I was like thinking about this, and then when I was taking some notes, were Fire in the Sky, Signs, and the X-Files.
Yes.
And as somebody who grew up where the X-Files was event television, and the music scared my sister out of the room, I felt like this was the type of stuff that like Mulder had seen his sister be like, abducted when he was young. This was that Sky scene, which if you ever go back and rewatch Fire in the Sky, what you will find about Fire in the Sky is that it is an insanely good 10 minutes out of one of the most boring 90-minute movies you'll ever watch.
True.
It's so boring, other than that one scene that everybody remembers,
right?
Which really speaks to the power of that one abduction scene.
Yes, totally agree. It's
some signs in here too. I thought, you do see there's also some Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Absolutely.
So what I liked is it didn't feel like he was reinventing any wheels.
No.
And I think that a lot of times, especially with like remake culture and like making remakes and requels and all these things, there's this idea that we have to do something brand new we have to have Corey Cunningham become the main character of a Halloween movie.
Oh no.
There's got to be some kind of thing to do it different.
Yeah.
And sometimes just making a really good throwback, or paying homage by doing like a modern take on a classic genre is fine. And I don't think he rewrote the wheel for most viewers, right? But I think that it's a really good wheel. And to
Right.
see a fresh coat of paint on that wheel
Yeah.
was really fun. I don't think the movie overstayed its welcome. I think it was like 90 minutes, 95 minutes.
Yeah.
I think Kaitlyn Dever was amazing in this movie. I mean, she is basically on screen the entire film
Yeah.
with almost no dialogue.
Right.
And yet you are completely invested in what happens to her, what she's dealing with. And I don't know about you, but I was watching this and it never occurred to me that there was no dialogue until the moment I heard dialogue. And then I went, oh shit, I never heard her speak before. And I think that doesn't happen for like an hour into the movie, maybe even more.
Yeah, well, okay, so that's pretty much the main like kind of gimmick of the movie, right? That's something that people bring up pretty much right away. That was spoiled for me before I saw it. I was on social media and someone said that the movie was practically a silent movie, right? And when I knew that, I kind of was aware of it and I was looking for it, and I would get a little frustrated because, you know me, I've said this like 7,000 times on this channel, but like I hate exposition dumps, right? And like, I just hate when someone has to be like, well, there's aliens. And when they come down, they have these things that they put in your throat. And those things actually control. Like, I would much rather they just show it and we have to pick up on it and understand what we're seeing. And that's what this movie does in spades, right? It doesn't explain anything. But you brought up this one point, which is, I think this is kind of the heart of why it's like kind of like Black Phone for me, where I'm like, oh, it could be better. You keep comparing it to the X-Files, and I agree. There was one other show I think you compared it to, but for me, I keep thinking the Twilight Zone. And there's even one episode of the Twilight Zone in particular where there's this woman who lives by herself in like a cottage or a cabin or whatever, and there's these aliens that are kind of terrorizing her. And here's a spoiler for this episode from like 1964, but she basically destroys the alien ship, and it turns out it's from Earth, and she's like a giant on another planet. But it really felt like that episode of the Twilight Zone. Now, with a show like that, the Twilight Zone's only a half hour. Other shows like Black Mirror or something like that, the show's like 50 minutes. And that's kind of the length I feel like this movie could have been. Like, I like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers angle. And we're going to go into spoilers now for anyone who hasn't seen this movie. So definitely, turn this off, go watch it, and then come back. But like, when she goes to like leave town, for example, and the people that are on the bus with her, they have like those things in their throat and they're coming after her. That was actually maybe, I thought, the scariest part of the movie was when other people were taking over. And I liked that approach a lot, but I felt like there was maybe like one scene too many with like a gray alien kind of coming after her, that like it was thrilling and it looked good, but like, it's like, okay, we already kind of saw this, like it almost could be like better as just like an episode of a show, like an anthology show, like Creep Show or the X-Files. I mean, not the X-Files, Twilight Zone,
I could see that. I can see where, like, especially if you knew going in that it was silent or not. And again, it wasn't silent. Obviously, it's just there's no speaking.
Barely, yeah.
But what I liked about the non-speaking thing is that it gives you said it, there's no exposition because this is a young adult. Yeah. She's in her probably early 20s.
Yeah.
And she lives alone in a big house off the beaten path.
Right.
So like the movie could have done like a silly kind of thing where she talks to herself out loud, or she has a pet that she talks to and like vocalizes her fears to.
Right.
But like when you live alone in the countryside and you know that, nobody's going to hear you, why are you going to start talking? Even, and especially when you're trying to keep quiet because there's something after you.
Right. And see, like, that works. You're right. It works like for almost the entire fucking movie, right? Except it's like when you're aware of it, you almost kind of feel like, okay, well, she would have at least like said something here. Like she would have at least been like, fuck, or like, oh God, what the fuck? Like, and when it's like, okay, well, there's just basically no dialogue. It's like the inverse of what I always complain about. It's like she would have said something, or just like when she goes to go into the town and she goes to the police precinct, right? They're clever. They do this scene where like she sees the parents of the girl that she accidentally killed, and the mom spits on her, and it's like this sort of shocking moment. So like no one can actually say anything because everyone's in shock, right? But like if I experienced what she experienced, and I was living by myself for years, when I go into that town where everyone's just like walking around ho hum, kind of like they're extras in a sitcom, just talking in the background, I would go up to the first guy and be like, dude, it's fucking aliens. You see the fucking aliens? And it's like, the movie's good. I feel like the Black Phone where I'm nitpicking and I'm picking at things I don't like. But the movie would be like, for me, it's like maybe an 8 or an 8.5. The movie would be like a 9 or a 9.5 if there was just like a little bit more talking. It didn't feel as gimmicky. And maybe there's like one less gray alien scene.
I think that again, I think this is just a minimalist approach of what they were trying to do with this, where they really wanted this to be a movie about Bryn. Right. The Kaitlyn Dever, her name in the movie is Bryn. They wanted this to be a movie about her. Right. And so the idea that and really and I'll tell you, this was my favorite part of the movie. Forgetting about the aliens. Yeah. What I loved about this movie is that I was sitting there for over an hour going, why is she by herself? Mm-hmm, what? Mm-hmm. Why doesn't she go up to these people and say something? Why does she visit the grave of her friend? What happened to her friend? And again, I feel like a lesser movie would have put in, flashbacks throughout the movie. Now there is one later on, but it is brought on by something. Right. It's not just like a flashback stuck in there to let you, the audience, in on a secret. Like we're left to kind of figure out that this is a very awkward, very introverted person who lives alone and who spends her day, mailing out for pieces of like a Christmas Village train set. That she, and that's like her life. And, she has routines, but, there's no other people that are part of her routines. Yeah. And we know that she used to have personal connections, but that something must have happened. Yeah. Now, I don't know. I don't know if I went as far as to say that she like got into a fight with her friend when they were 12 years old and she picked up a rock and, you said spoilers, so I could say it, that she picked up a rock and just swung it at her friend's head and accidentally on purpose killed her when she was a young girl. And that led to her basically being ostracized from the community. Right. But I kind of felt it was something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And so I loved for 70 minutes, not really knowing anything about this character other than what I was able to put 2 and 2 together. She's introverted, she's awkward, and something happened in her past that led to her being completely removed. And so it almost would have felt weird. And I think I wouldn't have liked this if she just ran up to a random stranger and was like, "There's aliens," because it would have felt contrary to that character. And like I didn't have it spoiled for me that there wasn't any dialogue. Right. So I just kept thinking to myself, "Oh man, she just doesn't have anybody to talk to." It's not that she's mute. It's that she doesn't have anybody to talk to. And I think Duffield posted some of the pictures of the script. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the script is just like, it almost looks like Jack Torrance in The Shining wrote the script, where it's like Bryn dives under the thing.
Yeah.
alien is coming. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. You're like,
Right.
she picks up a thing, stab him in the head, stab him in the head, stab him in the head. And it's like this crazy, like frenetic screenplay, which sounds weird when you find out, according to IMDb, there's only like 8 spoken words in the whole movie.
Right.
And there's like one concrete line of dialogue that comes way later in the movie.
Right.
But like, you think to yourself, like, oh, the actors still have to read what to do and where to go, and so they still need a screenplay.
Right.
And what must that look like? And it's really the things that I saw online were really cool. And Kaitlyn Dever, the only movie I'd ever seen her in was Booksmart.
Yeah.
Which she was the lead. She was one of the two leads, and it was fine. It was a fun movie.
Sure.
But apparently, like, she was one of the daughters on the Tim Allen sitcom Last Man Standing.
Oh, okay.
She was in like 140 episodes of that. She was also in Dope Sick, which I heard was great. I didn't watch, but I heard was great.
Yeah.
And she's one of the main characters, I think, in the Dear Evan Hansen movie that came out last year.
Oh boy.
I aside from Booksmart, I had not seen her in anything, but I was really blown away by her performance here. She has a look of one of those actresses who is going to still being who I feel sadly is still going to be cast as a high school student when she's like 31.
Right.
Because she had, when the movie started, I didn't know if she was supposed to be 16 or 25.
Right.
And it took me a few minutes to realize, oh, she's an adult. She lives alone, because she has a very young face to her. And I have a feeling that, like, if a movie, I'm hoping she doesn't get cast as high schoolers anymore, but she has that look about her.
Right.
But she was my favorite part of this movie. I feel like this movie could have not been as good for me.
Yeah.
If it was a different actress or if it was a different type of performance. And I think she just got the material that was written so well.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never seen her in anything else. I do want to see Booksmart. Mike Bongiorno is watching. I know he likes Jenny Nicholson, who's this amazing YouTuber. Jenny Nicholson has this great video where she makes fun of that Evan Hansen movie, and it's just really funny, like laugh out loud funny if you watch her video on Evan Hansen.
Speaking of movies where like 30-year-olds play high school students, right?
Yes, right. That's what I was thinking of when you were saying that. Yeah. But what I was going to say was that you just said something like, the main protagonist was the main draw for you, and that like you would have not been as invested in the movie if it wasn't like for her. And, I think you're totally right. And it's not just like her acting and the fact that she looks so young and stuff like that. I mean, her acting is phenomenal throughout this whole movie, right? But there's something about the aesthetic, about her house and her character and the way her character acts and moves when she's not being chased by a gray alien, and the way that she dresses and stuff. It feels, because you kept saying how like it felt like it was from a time, like it's from the 90s. And she almost feels like she's from like the 80s. The way that she's dressed and her house and stuff, it has this sort of like flowers in the attic kind of vibe to it, where it's like this sort of old fashioned thing. She's always put on these like long bathrobes and stuff. She's not sitting there like wearing like, in a typical horror movie, she'd be wearing like, like panties or something, and like, like a sleeveless shirt. But in this, she's got like this like long, she's almost like an old woman but she looks like a little girl. And I think that makes this movie kind of unique. And I think it also just makes it interesting because it's like so juxtaposed, right? There's this gray alien stuff, which is straight out of the X-Files. And it's, you said a couple of times, you're not reinventing the wheel. It's, something we've seen many times. And the gray alien designs are essentially just like the gray alien designs you see when people say they were abducted by aliens. It's like the generic thing. People have them like as lawn decorations sometimes in Texas. A little side note, when you go to my supermarket, there's a store that just has all these like metal sculptures that you can buy right near it, right? And there's these 6 feet tall, super green gray aliens, and they are just jacked. They're just super cut. They have like a whole bunch of abs, and I'm like, who wants a bunch of jacked gray aliens in their yard? But that's a little side tangent. But what I was going to say was that there's this one scene that I really, really liked in this movie that really captures that juxtaposition I was talking about, where the aliens are probing her mind, and you see her with her mom, who is obviously dead, and she's talking to her mom, and they're at a table, like they seem to be happy, and then all of a sudden, one of those abduction beams, those like kind of the beams that always pull someone up into the ship, comes down and freezes the mom and her in place. And I really, really liked that mechanic because it like took the weird alien gray shit that we all know, we've seen 100 times, and it stuck it into this very emotional moment. And it used it as a mechanic in the flashback. And I thought that was a really interesting sequence. Oh, look at this. Mike's just like in this. He's the third person in our video here. At night, she's wearing an Ebenezer Scrooge nightgown. That's right.
Yes.
Yes. I needed her to open up the window at one point and say to a little boy, "Have you seen the fucking aliens? What day is today? There's a lot of fucking aliens." But no, I sound like I don't like this movie, and I do. I just it's very crazy because it's like Black Phone, which is this movie that everybody loved, you included. I think Black Phone was on your top 10, right?
Oh, it was maybe even top 5 last year. I really enjoyed the Black Phone. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: we're getting close to the end of 2023. Is this movie going in your top 10?
I think there's a possibility that this could make my top 10, but it would probably be in the bottom half, like 6 to 10 range.
Right.
I loved parts of this movie, but I don't think this was like a blow away great movie. I do think that it is a little, given the current state of like the way social media is, I do think that this movie might fall into a category that other movies have fallen into for some people, where Stephen King raves about it on social media and everybody starts raving about it on social media. And then you go, "Oh, I gotta run. Stephen King said this is the best movie of the year." And then you watch it and you go, "Huh?"
Right.
And I think this could fall victim to overhype.
Yes.
I mean, I sat in Hereditary on the Thursday night screening. I had wanted to see Hereditary so bad. Right. I didn't read a review. I didn't see a YouTube reaction. I sat in Hereditary, and that movie ended, and I was like frozen to my fucking chair in the theater. And I knew I had just seen a movie that had like fundamentally changed me as a horror fan.
Yeah.
And so like a month later, when I saw people like, "I can't believe people like this stupid Hereditary movie." That's it. I knew that I was lucky to get in before the hype had started.
Yes.
There are movies like that for me. Mandy was a movie like that for me, where like everybody, "Holy shit, this new Nicolas Cage movie where he's fighting these people with this crazy weapon." And then I saw it and I was like, yeah, it's nuts, but like that's the movie that we're all going crazy about. Like,
yes.
And like I've rewatched Mandy and it's good. I enjoy it. It's just I feel like something was lost for me because of the hype. And I get that hype can totally impact the way you see a movie.
Yes.
And so I do think that there are going to be people that this movie does fall kind of flat for.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it hit everything that I wanted it to hit. It was a great standalone performance from a young actress who I think is going to just do great things. Right. It was, Brian Duffield, a guy who I've like been a huge fan of for the last several years. Some of my favorite scripts over the last 5 years, between Love and Monsters, Spontaneous, The First Babysitter, Underwater, which you mentioned, and the fact that I love all the stuff that he's homaging. You know, I love Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I love the X-Files.
Yeah.
I grew up with Fire in the Sky. So it was, for me, it did hit those beats.
Yeah.
I would probably say, you know, if I'm giving it a X out of 10, it's probably around between an 8 and an 8.5, something like that. So I don't think it's like creme de la creme 9-10 territory, but for me it was straddling the line between very good and great.
Yeah.
That's where it lives for me. It's in that like very good to great territory. For you, it seems like it's in the middle of good to very good.
Yeah, it's funny because the way that we're describing it, it sounds like we're kind of disagreeing with each other a bit, but your score you just gave is the exact score I said too.
Yeah,
So,
I wasn't scared by it. I was thrilled by it.
Yeah.
I thought that the alien design, at first I was taken a little aback by it because of how old school it felt.
Right.
But the more they were on screen, the more I really enjoyed it. The more I really liked that he went with that very old Twilight Zone, you know, 1950s. I think I read on IMDb that the design of the aliens was based on what people described in their alien abductions back in the 50s.
Right.
Which, you know, again, if I said to you 1950s alien, you know, there's that great moment at the beginning of Men in Black where Kay is trying to convince Jay, and he shows him the picture of them meeting the aliens back in the 60s. And he's like, oh, you brought that tall man flowers.
Right.
And like, those are what the aliens look like. You know, big, skinny little bodies, big heads, big eyes. And it's like that traditional, almost stereotypical 1950s to 60s alien. And you know, not every alien needs to be a xenomorph.
Right. Good point. No, we're on the same page, man. And, as someone who's been to Roswell, New Mexico, like, it just feels like these aliens are straight out of the museum that they have in Roswell, New Mexico, which is awesome, by the way. But here's the thing. Brian Duffield, I've only seen 2 movies of his, and they're both science fiction movies, Underwater and this. And, I would be doing him a disservice if I didn't give praise to the world building, because even though it is very generic stuff, they're just gray aliens. They're like picking up people with beams. They're even the creatures that they kind of put into people's mouths. Like, that's kind of generic too, where they're just like these kind of crawly creatures. We've seen stuff like that on Star Trek. And in the 90s, besides the X-Files and stuff, there was all these like little mini series or like shows that didn't last very long called like, Dark Skies, and there was another one called Invasion. There was a lot of movies where it was like sort of this Invasion of the Body Snatchers type mini series, and that felt like it was from that too. And so even though it's all stuff that we've seen before, like you said, they haven't reinvented the wheel, it felt like it had this like built world where Brian Duffield sat down. He's like, okay, well, the Greys do this. When it's this kind of light, this is what's going to happen. When she's abducted and they're on the ship, it's this really great surreal kind of moment where you don't really know what is surrounding her. It's just sort of this like kind of very dim light, and there's all these little small lights. And then the aliens come up to her. You have no idea what they're saying because they're just doing the little alien language, like, right? And it's so ambiguous that even when it comes to the very end of the movie, which I definitely think we should discuss, you don't really fully understand what happened. Like with the creatures, so there's these like tentacle little creatures that they stick into people's mouths. And when she got one stuck into her mouth, I thought that was once again like a really good scene, very effective. She's held up by the beam, and the alien is walking up underneath her, and it's out of focus. And I thought that was actually very scary. The out of focus alien like walking underneath her. Then it comes up to her, and you know what's coming. And it's like a cat coughing up a hairball. It's like one of your cats, Danny, coughing up a hairball. And then it opens up its mouth, and she's forced to open up her mouth, and the thing comes out and goes into her. Now, what I really liked was it wasn't just like this thing's going to control her, and then she eventually just pukes it up. It's that she pukes it up, and then I guess they take those things and use them to make copies of people. So a science fiction guy like me does my fantasy book again. I'm like, okay, what's the Greys' plan? Are they like planning to basically replace every human? Do they like invade worlds and like make copies of people and replace them? And that's kind of the beauty of this movie is it's never explained. It's just super ambiguous. Like, do they always copy people, or do they just like take over some people and they copy her?
There were the people that had the things that were in their throats, which to me, those people were like taken over.
Right.
And at the end of the movie, what I liked about the end of the movie is the ambiguity of it, where you don't really know. You kind of know what's going on, but you don't know from her point of view what's happening. Like this is it. She ends up walking into like this community where everyone seems to is like taken over.
Yeah.
But they apparently still maintain enough humanity to like know how to square dance.
Right.
She ends up square dancing or dancing with the mailman at the end.
Right.
And she does not have the thing in her throat anymore. She's coughed it up. And it almost feels like she's like willingly given in.
Right.
To join and she's smiling for the first time in the movie.
Right.
And again, it makes me think of like, here's a character who's like fundamentally broken.
Yes.
She's all of the normal in her life disappeared when she was like 12. Because we saw in the gravestone of her friend, the girl was only, I think, 12 years old. And so you have like two normal 12-year-olds get into a fight, and one just, gets pushed to the ground, picks up a rock, throws it, swings it, and an absolute tragedy occurs, and it breaks her as a person. Yeah. And she's now 10, 15 years later, however old she is, she's an adult. She has nobody. She lives alone. She doesn't even speak by choice. Like, she has nobody to talk to. And this, like, opportunity to be with these, like, alien-controlled people gives her, like, the closest that she's ever had to normalcy. Right. Which is in itself kind of terrifying. And then like the camera pulls back and you see that this is not just happening to this tiny little Americana town where she lives, where Bryn lives, but it's happening like all over. Like, right. So I like that. Like does she just surrender to the aliens and what they like are trying to do to control her? But with that, like you said, we don't know what the aliens' main goal is. It's not like the Matrix where we get this elongated, albeit cool exposition where right. Like Morpheus is like, come Neo, let's spend the next 30 minutes talking about exactly what happened. And I'm not saying this to besmirch the Matrix. I'm just saying that's an example of like awesome exposition, because like the way it's done and the style that it's done makes it like one of the coolest movie experiences ever.
Right.
But then, he's like, they wanted to turn us into this battery. And there's none of that here. And it goes back to that beginning where she has all these pictures hanging of her and her friend. And it's like, we know something happened. We kind of want to know what it was, but we also want to respect the movie to not just spell things out for us. Right. And so, I did like the ending. I like the ambiguity of it. And it, in some weird and scary way, like it made like the fact that she's happy to be amongst like those possessed by aliens tells you a lot about her as a character and where, this movie in general. Yeah. And, kind of a good point to kind of pull this all together and wrap it up or whatever is that like the movie, the way it ends, it's very final, right? Like regardless of how you interpret it, this isn't the kind of movie where they're like, oh, I can't wait to, no one will save you too. Like there's nothing like that. No one will save you again. Right. Exactly. So like, I think that might be part of the hype
I think that people are so fucking used to everything being a franchise, everything being the setup for
Good
something,
point. Yeah.
that just to tell a story that's just, this is the story, here's the beginning, the middle, the end, we're done. Like, I think that is appealing to people these days. To have a movie that has, I mean, I'm not sure how much this budget was. I'm sure the budget's still relatively small compared to what most movies are these days, but it's a great looking movie. And to have like a great looking movie that's just got a beginning, middle, and end, that's it. That's very appealing, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm down for more Brian Duffield. I mean, you sound like a big fan. Believe it or not, I haven't seen the rest of his movies, but I'm totally down for checking them out. Maybe that could be something that we do. Maybe have like Brian Duffield month at some point in 2024, you know?
Yeah, I'm down to. Spontaneous is the type of movie that I think both of our daughters would really like because it
Yeah.
takes place in high school.
Yeah.
Pepper is starting high school in September.
Correct.
Yeah, so is Charlotte. And like it's about like a high school romance, and all of a sudden people just start spontaneously blowing up.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere. And yeah, and it's just like, how do we deal with this epidemic of people just exploding spontaneously? It's fantastic. Love and Monsters is awesome. I fucking loved Love and Monsters. You talk about him. Now, he only wrote that, but that has some of the best effects. Dylan O'Brien, I think, is the lead in that. It's really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you haven't seen The Babysitter, both of those movies are super fun. And Jenna Ortega is in those. Oh my God, I'm gonna forget her name now. The blonde from Ready or Not, who I love, and whose name.
I'll look her up. I know they've just mentioned her.
It's Agent Smith's niece.
Weaving. Something.
Yeah,
Weaving.
Samara Weaving.
Samara Weaving. There we go.
Oh, thank God. My brain. Still. Before we go, I just want to make one thing about No One Will Save You is on Hulu. And this is nothing about the movie, but God, I watch so much Hulu because there's shows that I watch that are on there, and they put out a lot of decent content.
Yeah.
But Hulu is getting more and more impossible to watch. They break their movies up now with ads. And there was one part of this movie where, like, right in the middle of it, I think it was John Squires, who is one of the guys from Bloody Disgusting on Twitter, who was like, it really hurts the tension of your movie when in the middle of like a 2-hour movie or in the middle of a 90-minute movie, like the aliens are about to grab you and then boom, 3 minutes of commercials.
Yes.
And it pisses me off that like the world of streaming it's like they convinced you to cut the cable because they want to offer you this like commercial free service that you have to pay for, but now they're tearing that up and they want you to pay even more money to get rid of the commercials. I'll just compare it to another streaming service that has an amazing horror collection out there right now, which is Peacock. What I like about Peacock is you click on a movie and it makes you watch 3 minutes of commercials right at the beginning.
Right.
And then your movie is commercial free.
Yeah.
And to me, that is so. I go to the movie theater all the time. Between 20 minutes of previews and then 6 more minutes of like Regal Unlimited ads and, ads for the concession stand and other commercials.
Yeah.
Like, I'm used to that. Like, give me the commercials before the movie and then let me watch the damn movie. So I had to give a criticism of Hulu. Like, put the commercials at the beginning and then let us watch a movie uninterrupted, please.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you got on your soapbox, my pauper friend, because some of us pay $14.99 and we don't have to look at ads at all, myself included. Let me put my monocle in. Yes, I do enjoy watching.
You're in education in Texas, so that's like cutting into your food balance at that point.
Yeah, no joke. It's ironic. I'm actually in a hotel because I'm going to a comic book convention today, Cowtown Comic Book Convention, and I'm sitting on the floor of my hotel room. And speaking of being an educator in Texas, I'm half worried I'm going to get murdered in this hotel room. And I'm also half grossed out that I'm sitting on the floor doing this recording.
We would get really good views though if like.
Oh yeah, live stream. Just someone just comes in like, shut up! You're talking about an alien invasion movie at 7:52 a.m. But anyway, if you guys want to go ahead and give me a day late birthday gift, I would love a couple more subscribers to the Lassercast. And Danny and I, we've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and Danny is putting up content left and right every week. We meet once a week to talk about some kind of big movie or show. But then Danny's always covering the newest reviews and classics too that show in his area. What do you got this week up on the channel?
So by the time this goes up, Charlotte and I, speaking of franchises, Charlotte and I saw 10 last night.
Nice.
And we did a 30 to 40 second short review. And I put a link in that description to our franchise ranking because I have the 12-year-old, I have the near 13-year-old child who has now seen all 10 Saw films.
Nice.
Yes. Spoiler alert. We both really liked Saw 10. I have a preview video of our upcoming month tomorrow. As of when we're filming this, tomorrow is October. The Exorcist 50th anniversary is going to be playing at my local theater. So I think I'm going to take Charlotte to see The Exorcist in theaters tomorrow. So we'll probably throw a short up about that. Very Tuesday, cool. I am going to an advanced screening of Exorcist Believer.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. So I will have a non-spoiler review of that up on the channel Tuesday night. Nice. So Tuesday, probably late because I'm seeing it at 7 o'clock Eastern time in New York.
Right.
So probably around 10 o'clock Eastern time, I'll have a spoiler-free review of Exorcist Believer. And then if you see it, we can do like a review of it together because we did Exorcist month not that long ago. Yeah. But yeah, Comic-Con is coming. The Brooklyn Horror Film Festival is coming. I will be at all 4 days of Comic-Con, tons of horror content there. John Carpenter is going to be there. The Blumfest panel is going to be there.
Nice.
Chucky season 3 begins. Creepshow season 4 begins. Mike Flanagan, Fall of the House of Usher begins.
Wow.
Athena and I are I finally got Athena to watch Haunting of Hill House. So yeah. We have that going. Nice, and then, man. Brooklyn Horror Film Fest is the week after. And I'm seeing 2 or 3 different movies there, including the festival finale, which is The Sacrifice Game, directed by Jen Wexler, who did The Ranger, a movie that I covered over at Geeks of Doom. I interviewed her for Geeks of Doom. Really cool movie that you can find on Shudder.
Okay. Damn, man, that's a lot. Yeah, and I am actually really excited about Fall of the House of Usher. Too, that the trailer looks super crazy, and I just love Midnight Mass so much. I mean, I love so much Flanagan stuff. Yeah, you're lucky, man. You're going to New York Comic-Con. There's gonna be some big people here. I think for Cowtown, there's just Cullen Bunn, who I think Danny will know him because he wrote the comic that The Empty Man is based on.
Oh yeah.
He's a comic book writer. He writes superheroes and stuff, but he writes a lot of horror comics that are really great too. But he's gonna be there, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for the birthday wish, Mike, too. Thank you, everyone who's watched as well. And we just love hearing what you guys thought. Tell us what you thought about, No One Will Save You. And Danny and I will be back next